Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's Kath Garrett-Jones. I'm the Executive Director for the Council of Catholic School Parents, and I'm joined by my colleague Jenny Skopanovic, our Professional Officer, as well as our special guest and presenter today, Mary Ryan, who you can see on the screen. Mary is the Head of Professional Learning and Accreditation for Catholic Schools New South Wales. We're very grateful to have Mary with us to share with us some of her knowledge, extensive knowledge, around SchoolSpeak, understanding the language of schools. We expect that for many of you with children in Catholic education, if you don't have a background in teaching, sometimes it can be a bit of a tricky space understanding what's being spoken about or written about and what you're reading and learning. So we're going to hand over to Mary, and we ask that God watches over us in all we do, the decisions we make and the communications we have, and we give thanks and praise for each other and the gifts we bring. And we thank Mary very much for her time with us today. Can I also add, if you've got questions along the way, you can use the little chat space up there on the right, on the top of the screen, and I'll be monitoring that. So typically what we'll do is just let some questions drift into that space, and then we'll collect up themes, and I'll just gently interrupt Mary, who's already said I'm able to do that, and she will happily respond to those questions as best she can. So once again, thank you, and very our welcome to you, and thank you for coming along.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I don't know whether over the years I have had something to do with any of you. I was in a space similar to Kath a few years ago working in Sydney Catholic Schools in parent and community engagement, and it's an absolute pleasure and a joy to speak to parents, the primary educators of the children in our schools. So a little bit about me just to start. I am currently the Head of Professional Learning and Accreditation at Catholic Schools New South Wales. I've got 39 years experience in Catholic education, mostly as a primary school teacher, but in also senior leadership in schools and system leadership in both Sydney Catholic Schools and now Catholic Schools New South Wales. I do have particular interest in parent and community engagement. It's almost, I suppose, an undervalued part of what happens in schools. And it's a very, very important role that we play as the co-carers of those little people in our world. So my role now really centres around teacher development, but I'm really happy to put my head back into this space. I'm hoping you can all see my screen. This is a really big topic, so we'll get into it as much as we can. I'm going to start, though, by just explaining a little bit about the organisation that I work for. There are 598 Catholic schools, both independent schools and diocesan schools in the state of New South Wales, and Catholic Schools New South Wales as an organisation does not run or manage any of those schools. So if you've got a complaint to make about a school, it's no good coming to us. We actually don't have that sort of oversight. Our responsibility is as a funding authority, and unlike Donald Trump, we're not able to withhold funds from dioceses if we don't like what they're doing. We're a registration authority, so we ensure that schools are actually compliant in terms of what legislation says, and we do that on behalf of NESA, the New South Wales Education Standards Authority. We're also an advocate at both the state and Commonwealth level for Catholic education, and my role is pivotal in helping to develop teachers to be the best that they can be. There are 11 dioceses across the state of New South Wales, so many of your children will probably be in a diocesan school, but there's also what we refer to as RA and PJP schools. They're the independent schools. There's 47 of them in the state of New South Wales, and I've listed a couple there that you may be familiar with. We work really closely with all the diocesan schools and with all those RA and PJP schools as well. Kath mentioned that I'm happy to take questions along the way, so I really am very happy to do that. Pop them in the chat and Kath can interrupt me at any time. So firstly, this question around curriculum and syllabus, two words that are thrown around all the time interchangeably, and even NESA really use them interchangeably. They actually do mean quite discrete, different things. Curriculum really refers to the entirety of what happens in a teaching space, in a school. It's all the things that we teach children. So an example might be the fact that we ask children to line up, to have self-control, to manage their behaviour. That is part of the curriculum, the broader and sometimes referred to as the hidden curriculum. We teach children manners at school. We help you to do that. We encourage them to be to have a social conscience, to think about others. All of those sorts of things are part of the curriculum. Now, it can happen within a subject area. A book in English might actually cover topics about injustice or refugees or something like that. So it can happen as part of the work in a subject area, but it also happens as part of those broader discussions and things that happen within schools. A syllabus, on the other hand, is very specifically the documents which are freely available to anyone. They're freely available on the NESA website, which actually are a detailed documentation that outlines the specific content, learning outcomes, and assessment requirements for any subject. So the difference is curriculum really is that broad thing of all the things we teach in schools for children, whereas a syllabus document is those specific expectations attached with a subject. There is another interesting document that it's worth having a look at, and that's the Alice Springs Declaration of Pathway Educational Goals for Young Australians. So in about 2021, the Ministers of Education from across the country came together, and they've done this on a number of occasions, and they made some decisions, that input, that we give feedback, we write submissions around these things as well. It's part of our advocacy work as Catholic Schools New South Wales, about, well, what are the educational goals for young Australians? What are we actually trying to achieve when we send students to school? There was a time when students were sent to school so they were prepared for the factory floor. That obviously is no longer the case, but preparing students for the workforce is an important part of school. It continues to be an important part of school, but it's not the only goal of school. And there are these broader ideas, things like ensuring that students are able to partake in the democracy, be conscientious and contributing citizens. And there's also that they be creative and critical thinkers. They're the sorts of broader ideas and the broader intentions. And curriculum contributes to beyond just the subject area and the content and knowledge needed. Curriculum contributes to creating these adults one day who can contribute to a society. And I think particularly in democracy, you need people to be able to consider and think and make decisions and contribute in a way to their community that's both positive and life-giving for all. And in a Catholic school, there is also, of course, another aspect to all of that, and that is our faith and our religion and the way in which we encourage students to not just to consider social justice and think of others, but how we contribute to common good and the dignity of the human person. I've been asked to talk too about what's new in the reform syllabus. This is a really hard question to answer. I actually decided not to talk about what's new in the reform syllabus, but maybe to talk about what the intentions of the reform syllabus, or the intentions are of the reform syllabus. So firstly, there was a really big review done in 2019, 2020 by a man by the name of Jeff Masters. And again, this is a place where Catholic Schools New South Wales and the Council of Catholic School Parents, we make submissions to these reviews and put forth our point of view, and after we collect information from our stakeholders, and we present these submissions so that there's, I suppose, a Catholic perspective around the development of curriculum. And we are big stakeholders, obviously, in education, particularly in New South Wales. I think we are the third or fourth bigger provider of education in the country. And so we have an important role to play in forming and shaping the way these things happen. So as an outcome of that was that any review would need to make the New South Wales curriculum clearer to understand and to teach. Teachers felt that it was unclear about what their requirements were, and they wanted clarity around that. They wanted the curriculum, the syllabuses, to be decluttered and to be really direct, really explicit about what's the main knowledge and skills that all students should have. What do they need and when do they need that knowledge? And what do you do if they don't get that knowledge? How do you move and navigate that? They wanted to understand the implications for planning, teaching, assessing, and reporting. So as a teacher, what are those implications around planning, teaching, assessing, and reporting? And there was a determination, which hadn't really been done before, to draw on the expertise of teachers to ensure that the review's outcomes continue to support their work. Now, that really has not been done before and was quite a difficult thing. I don't think teachers are used to giving feedback to a body like NESA around the syllabuses. And so there's a couple of ways NESA did that. They created a group called the TENS Network, which was a teacher expert network group. The TENS Network gathered across the country, across the state, in regional and metropolitan groups. They were cross-sectoral, so department, independent, and Catholic schools teachers came together. There were secondary networks and primary networks. They took on board implementation activities. They took units of work, they tested them in schools, they gave feedback, they took syllabuses as draft, took them to schools, produced units of work, gave feedback, and this process has been going on for the last 3 years. The other opportunity that happened because of the new curriculum and a new activity was a Have Your Say. And if you're interested in having your say, particularly in some of the secondary curriculum syllabus documents that are still being designed and developed, there's opportunity on the NESA website, and I've got links to that on my last slide, where you can actually go in and you can make commentary about what you can see, what they're planning to do. So that's open to teachers, parents, and students as well. So there are a couple of things that are actually new about the new syllabus, but also what are those intentions are. If I do give an example of what's new, I thought I might just talk about phonics and phonemic awareness. There's probably a misunderstanding, and people will say, oh, phonics wasn't in the syllabus before. It's always been there, and phonemic awareness, and I know because I've spent a lot of years teaching kindergarten and year one over the years. Early stage 1 and stage 1 is how we refer to them. So I'm very familiar with those syllabus documents. So phonics and phonemic awareness were always there, but they have been probably lifted and more explicit direction has been given about what expectations are there for teachers to deliver. So it's really, really clear what those expectations are, rather than probably being slightly hidden maybe and not as definitive about those expectations. So the fact that teachers now have to use decodable text if needed for students as they're learning to read. Now, that doesn't mean you don't get a child who arrives in kindergarten who can read and maybe has to move into a different syllabus stage, and I'm going to talk about stages next, I think, to do their work. Most children come to school unable to read, and therefore you start with these decodable texts, which by about year 1 you would start to wean them off those decodable texts. And it doesn't mean that they sit exclusively on them. The syllabus is very, very explicit that at the same time they need exposure to a really broad range of literature, and that's very much a part where not just teachers but parents can become involved. We wouldn't want children being exposed to only ideas that they can understand. We're trying to broaden and make use of those neurons that are firing off in their brains. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, Kath, but happy to be stopped at any time. So teachers and schools talk about stages all the time. It's really pretty simple. And when you get my presentation, it'll have just the notes that I've collected as well, or have associated with this, and that lays out the stages for you very clearly. Early stage 1 is kindergarten. Stage 1 is years 1 and 2. Stage 2, years 3 and 4. Stage 3, years 5 and 6. Stage 4, years 7 and 8. Stage 5, years 9 and 10. And stage 6 is senior secondary, years 11 and 12. So within stage 1, there's a part A and a part B. It does not have to be done as a linear progression. It really depends on the students. It depends on whether some schools work in stages, some schools work in year groups. It really is a decision that is made on the ground in the school, depending on the context, depending on the year group, in terms of the year group, not just the makeup of the year group might depend on interests, might depend on any adjustments that might need to be made. So there is, by the end of the stage, you will have to have covered all those areas within that stage. However, you can make decisions about how you actually do that, and it might relate to a number of factors. I'm also just checking the time because so key learning areas, KLAs, are referred to lots. And on that slide, you can actually see there's K to 6 key learning areas, and there's 7 to 12. English, mathematics, science, human society, its environment, or HISI we call it. It's history and geography, and they usually alternate in terms in schools doing history and geography. PDHPE, which is the personal development, physical health and physical education, and creative arts, which is it's your creative arts in terms of painting, dance, all those sorts of things. Languages is a KLA. However, it's not a compulsory KLA, and often is around access to people to be able to teach languages as well. There are some schools that, there might be an Italian language school or an Arabic school or something like that that specifically teaches a language, Or I've worked in a school where Chinese was spoken because that was a community language. It was very prominent in the school. And so we were able to organise for that to happen as well. But it can be complicated, and it's not always the simplest thing to do, even in terms of just having teachers to teach the subjects. And you can't have teachers, unqualified teachers, alone with a class. So you might have community members that teach, but then you have to have a teacher in that classroom as well. So it can be complicated, but it is also a subject area that can be or a key learning area of the primary school classroom as well. And then there's, of course, the key learning areas in the secondary school 7 to 12. And you break all those down. Science, for example, has your biology and your physics and your chemistry and all of those as well. So all those syllabuses are written by NESA in collaboration with teachers and the broad profession and academics, but parents are also encouraged to have a say, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. At the moment, all of the primary curriculum documents, syllabus documents are complete, so there's no more have a says around those. There are a few in the secondary area if people are interested in looking into that. In a Catholic school, there is also the key learning area of religious education from year 7 right through to year 12. These these syllabus documents are not produced by NESA. They are produced usually by the diocese. They're endorsed by that diocesan bishop or archbishop. On this slide, I've got as an example the Sydney Catholic Schools Religious Education Syllabus documentation. It's freely available on their website. And all approved by the Archbishop of Sydney, Archbishop Anthony Fisher. Sometimes they share these across dioceses, sometimes they create their own. We had, over the last few years, or when I was in school, a book, and many of you might be familiar with it, called To Know, Worship and Love, that was used from kindergarten through to year 10. 11 and 12 are slightly different. Students either they have to choose an RE subject in a Catholic school. They either choose Studies of Religion 1 or 2, which is a NESA developed course and is not essentially, you do study Christian religions within that, but you study multiple religions in it. Then if you don't do Studies of Religion 1 or 2 as an ATAR subject, you will have to choose what's called Studies in Catholic Thought, and that is a subject that is not produced or developed by NESA. You cannot get any credit towards your ATAR by doing that, and is developed by the diocese and endorsed by the bishops as well. So happy to talk some more about that if you want me to. And you will be able to go in and link to the Sydney Catholic Schools documentation around RE, which is all in draft still, I believe. They've just developed it, and so they're out trialling it in their schools, but it's freely available for you to see. So students have a learning entitlement. NESA tells schools how much time they have to spend in each subject area across the week. So that's for your perusal. And you can see there that there's the additional, it's not very clear, but there is that additional time in green. There's up to 20% where people can make decisions, schools can make decisions about how that time is used. And in a Catholic school, some of that time is actually used for the teaching of RE. So then when you've got your RE lessons built in every week, and it's usually do about an hour a day in the primary school anyway of RE. But then there are other times where you might do peer support would take up some of that time. You know, you might do, I don't know, I'm trying to think, you can use some of that time if you've got a drama production going on or those sorts of things. But there is a little bit of flexibility in the week for schools and teachers. Assessment. I'm just checking the time too, Kath. What are we up to?
No, you're all good. You've got 12 minutes. Yep,
okay.
thanks.
So assessment. In my way of thinking, assessment is where teaching really starts, because we don't know where students are, we don't know where we're going to take them. So what do they know? What do we need them to know, and how are we going to get them there? They are 3 key questions. There's 2 types of assessments that you'll hear teachers talk about. There's summative assessment and there's formative assessment. And like, I suppose that I think their words give them away. Summative is the summation of the learning. So your HSC is a summative assessment. Oh, sorry, what is RE? Sorry, religious education is RE. Fantastic, thank you. I just noticed that. I'm sorry if I talk in terminology. I fall into it very easily because I sit in education, and that is what happens all the time. That is a really good question. So these two types of assessment, summative assessment and formative assessment. Summative is, as it suggests, it is the sum of the learning. What do children know because they've learnt it? Now in the HSC, it's probably the ultimate summative assessment because there's really nothing else that happens for those students as a result of that HSC in terms of their learning in the school because they move on to another environment. However, in another way, the HSC information and the outcomes for those students becomes formative for students coming through because there's a whole piece of work that happens around HSC analysis in schools. And what they do is they look at where students have landed, what they've done, who succeeded, particular questions, where have they done well. They go back to schools and they examine their own teaching and learning programs, and they see why they have succeeded or failed. They share those success and failures and try and improve for the next year. So while HSC is very much a summative for the student, it's very much a summative assessment. For the profession, it's actually quite formative because it does then inform future teaching and learning for other students. So formative assessment forms the teaching and learning. It is the assessment that happens along the way to actually then give information for what's going to happen next. What do I need to reteach? What did I teach well? Why did it work well? What did I do that worked in that session that didn't work in the other session? Most of my students have understood this, but this group haven't understood that. So the
Mary?
assessments that yep.
Oh, sorry. Can
Yep.
I just jump in and ask if you could give an example? So, for example, as a classroom teacher, some formative assessment might include maybe 10 quick questions at the beginning of the lesson or,
It
or
might.
question and answering, in classrooms. So
Yes.
asking questions of children and then just identifying which kids seem to be getting it and which kids might need a little bit more support or assistance.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are both formal and informal types of formative assessment. So you might ask students to write a story, and you take that story and then you go through it and you have a look at what students are able to do. Are they struggling with writing sentences? Do they understand punctuation? And that then can help inform your teaching and learning program. You would then maybe midway ask them to do some writing, or they're doing writing anyway. So you take that, so that becomes a formative assessment. It helps to inform the teaching that's going on. So it could be it could be very informal, and it's the observations you make as you move around the classroom as a teacher. It could be more formal in terms of it's a piece of writing, you ask everyone to stop and write, and you collect that. And it could be much more formal, as in NAPLAN results. So NAPLAN results are a point in time formative assessment. They're diagnostic. They tell us what children are able to do and not able to do at that point in time. And most schools, I think every school would take their NAPLAN results and they would then go and analyse them and look at, well, what are children able to do? And they would compare them. If I give an example of that, I was responsible for mathematics at a primary school K-6 at one point in time. We got our NAPLAN results, and our year 3 and our year 5 did really poorly on 2D shapes. So we went back and had a look at our programs from kindergarten to year 6. What were we doing? What were we teaching? Now, 2D shapes is kind of something that you think is fairly simple and easy. And so we were treating it that way in our programs. So we went back and we tightened up what we were teaching, and we looked more carefully about how we were doing it and what we were doing. And we were able to show a really big improvement actually in the next year's NAPLAN results around 2D shapes. Our children had a much better understanding of that area of geometry. We're going to receive individual results for NAPLAN tests. That's a great question. I think you do receive individual test results, but we can talk about that in a minute. You'll receive individual results for your child, yes, and compared to both state and nationally, where your child sits right across in comparison, is my understanding. But I actually haven't looked at those for a long time. And if you wanted to talk a lot more about NAPLAN, Karen Ferranti from our office is an expert in NAPLAN, and I'm sure she'd be very happy to do something along the lines of that with you if you really wanted to. But generally, it is used to help to inform teaching. Most people would say that all assessment should be formative. It should in some way inform the teaching and learning that happens in the classroom. That's the purpose of it. And probably, yes, the only one that really is summative is HSC in a really solid program that also is used to inform, and those teachers come into our office actually to do that HSC analysis. So I jumped into that NAPLAN question. NAPLAN also compares your child to where the other children in their school. Okay, yeah. I haven't looked at NAPLAN results for quite a while, but I will. We can take some of those things on notice. But you will receive the NAPLAN results. Will tell you about where your child sits in comparison, yes, to others in their school, in schools that are like, and also across the state and the country. I might just go to that question. The curriculum a nationwide thing, or is it different state to state? So there's a national curriculum now in Australia, produced in around about 2017-18, I think. Oh no, earlier than that, I think. Anyway, that's beside the point. So there is a national curriculum. However, each state is required to teach the national curriculum. Some states pick up the national curriculum produced by ACARA, an organisation called ACARA, exactly as it is. New South Wales, however, embeds the national curriculum in the NESA syllabus documents. So in a NESA syllabus document, you will see where a national curriculum is addressed, the Australian curriculum referred to it, is addressed, but there are also, it sits within the NESA syllabus. New South Wales are the only state, I believe, that has that sort of rigour, and the other states tend to pick up the Australian curriculum as is, and some states, up until the Australian curriculum, worked without a curriculum at all.
Can I just jump in, Mary? Sorry.
Yes.
We've had a question from Steve about whether the curriculum is a nationwide thing or is it different state to state? And there's also a good question around what does stage 1, 2, 3, 4 mean? I think if the reality is when we all went to school, it was, well, in my class, it was year 1 or grade 1 or kindergarten, but we grouped them together. Do you mind just mentioning the difference around stages, or what a stage means, as well as the difference between a state curriculum and what's happening at the national level?
So I think I just answered the one about the state curriculum. Steve, can you give a thumbs up if that is clear to you, or if you want me to go into that again? And while Steve has a think about that. So.
Oh, he's good. Thanks,
Yep,
Steve.
good. Okay, good.
Fabulous.
Okay, great. So stage 1, 2, 3, 4 mean when students are grouped for maths and English. I am thinking that potentially that school is doing some sort of an assessment on students and deciding what stage they're at, and then grouping them accordingly. Now, schools are free to do that. It would mean stage 1 means you're working at a year 1 or year 2 level in mathematics. Stage 2 would mean you're working at a year 3 to 4 level in mathematics. Stage 3 would mean you're working at a year 5, 6 level in mathematics, and stage 4 would mean you're working at a year 7 to 8 level in mathematics. Now, I can't really unpack how that school would do that. I'm assuming when you have a class of children, there can be 6 years of variation across that class. It is very unlikely, you can have a kindergarten class, it's very unlikely that every single child in that class in every subject is sitting in an early stage 1 syllabus. There will always be children who sit outside of that. An example would be a child, I taught a little boy in kindergarten a few years ago, and he was very, very, very clever at mathematics. We made adjustments in the classroom, and he was working at a stage 2 level, so he was actually working at year 3 level in mathematics, even though he was only 5. So we made adjustments to the teaching and learning that I was doing, and then in conjunction with his parents, we accelerated him. Now, in my 39 years of teaching, that is the only time I've ever seen a child accelerated. It's not done very often, but that was a way in that school to manage the variety of capability and the capacity of those children in their learning. Across any classroom, there is this huge variation of abilities. And so schools find different ways to try and manage that so students can be extended or be supported as they need. Is that helpful to the answering that question? Yes, higher stage means yes, more. So yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So in early stage 1, you're asking students in mathematics, for example, to be able to count forwards and backwards to 100. In stage 1, you're actually asking them to do it to 1,000, and then in stage 3, you're asking them to do it beyond 1,000 to infinity, basically. Now, in kindergarten, lots of children are able to count to 100, and so you would easily take them outside of that stage into some of the outcomes of the next stage up. Yes, I'm glad that
Great.
helps.
Thanks for that. We might have to wrap it up shortly. I know you've got something to add about partnership, but I'm also going to add into the chat space a link to the information for parents and carers page on NESA, so parents might be interested in going there.
Yeah, because partnership is really, really, really matters. And I was going to show a video. We really probably don't have time for that now, which is disappointing because it's so cute. But you can, it's very beautiful. But this idea, you don't have to have a deep understanding of the syllabus. What you have to do is have really good conversations with your children, and you have to have good relationships with your school. Schools will always send out at home an outline of what's being taught. So take the time to read those outlines and to know what your children are learning, and find ways, whether it's join the library, which is free, or go to the museum, to actually build children's knowledge and conversations at home about the sorts of things that they're learning. And I am a huge, and I have 3 very successful grown-up children, sitting around the dinner table and talking about your day at work and how you cope, because a lot of what you teach your children is actually those life skills of being able to be resilient and to be able to cope when things go wrong, by talking about your day at work and the people you deal with and the strategies you use to manage your work and your workplace and the demands on you. These are incredibly valuable pieces that parents give their children to help them to be able to manage and deal with the school and the school environment, which sometimes can be adverse for them, which is not a bad thing always. I will play the video very quickly.
Yeah,
if that's
I was just going to say
okay.
play the video, and then you might have a little quick look in the last question that we got there just before the video link was from Brooke about advocating for somebody above this stage level. Thanks.
I'll come back to that in a moment. So this is just to demonstrate what partnership is, because this little guy is not 3 yet, and I'll let you watch it first. So that little guy doesn't turn 3 until May, and he already is going to books. He's researching his birthday cake for his 3rd birthday. So he's doing some research around that. He's making connections to his world. He's heard lots of things around that man called Donald Trump. He is using the book correctly. He is going from left to right on the page. He's turning the pages correctly. All these things are in the early stage 1 syllabus. So this parent who's comfortably lying in bed while she's filming, and it is my niece, so I have to, I haven't actually asked permission. Might pull that actual video out when I send this to you. But these are the sorts of things that you need to be doing, which are really simple, normal things. How can someone advocate for their child who is above their stage and ensure their abilities and needs for them are met? It's through conversation with your school. It's through conversation with the teacher at the school, firstly. And if you're not satisfied by that, then you go and speak to the principal. And honestly, in the most difficult times, if you can keep that relationship positive, and schools can do it well, but I would be wrong to say schools always do it well. That wouldn't always be the case, but their intentions are always positive. So I would encourage you to go to your school and say, hey, for these reasons, I'm worried about this, or I'm seeing this, because you might find there's actually things set up in school already that addresses your child's needs. Or if I can give you another example, I taught a little boy who was really clever. He came in kindy to me, and his mother told me he was reading at level 15. Now, that's the level you leave one at. It's really, really clever and bright. He'd been assessed by the preschool. He was actually only reading every other line when he read. So he was decoding really, really well, but he was not comprehending really well, because it didn't matter to him that he was missing both lines. So there was a conversation with the parents to say, well, actually, he's really clever, but what we need to get him to doing is slow down and tracking with his finger and talk to him about the meaning of the books, because he had a whole other piece to learn, not just about those numbers and how high he got, but actually what's the purpose of reading, and was he addressing that purpose, because he actually wasn't. Go and talk to the school, find out what they are, what are your concerns, what are you worried about, what are you seeing, and what might they be doing to help him, or what could they do, and what can you do at home as well to be a support to them. I hope that helps, Brooke. Any other questions there, Kath, that you can see?
No, I think we're all good. I've put in the link for Nessa, and I've just reminded people that our latest edition of our newsletter has just hot off the press, and there's some great opportunities, and I can see Jenny's put a link in there too, so thank you, Jenny.
Kath,
Mary,
could I just add, I'm not sure what you put in, but if you go into the actual syllabus document, so if your child's in year 1, go into the Nessa English syllabus, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll actually see that there's a link to what parents can do to help. And it gives you some really great suggestions around the sorts of things you can be doing at home. They've got them from K to 10. It might be what you've put in, Kath, just not sure.
Yeah, it was just a broad link. But thank you so much, and thanks to our parents. I'm hopeful that you found that really beneficial, and I'm sure Mary could probably talk for hours, and I'm sure many of our parents could listen for hours as well. But please remember that we're here. You have our email addresses. If there's something specific that you'd like to follow up on, or you've got more questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And we're very grateful to you, Mary, for joining us, and to Jenny Skopanovic, who's behind the scenes pressing buttons and making sure things work the way they do. So thank you so very much. We very much appreciate it. I know Anne Thean, who is the chair of CCSP, has joined us as well, and Anne provides great leadership and support for our entire parent community across New South Wales and the ACT, and it's all voluntary, so we're very grateful to her. So thank you, everyone. We can see all your thank yous coming up the side. It makes our day, so we appreciate that. Have a wonderful day, and enjoy the remainder of the week. Thank you so much. Take care.
Kath,
Bye
can
for
I
now.
add one thing?
Oh, yeah, sure.
You will make the biggest difference to your child's life. You will make the biggest difference to your child's life. Nobody else. And no matter what goes on at school, you are the formers. You are the creators of who they are as people, and nothing will ever change that.
That is so true. Like Mary, 3 adult children, and I totally agree, and an ex-teacher, totally agree, spot on. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.